Hi everyone, welcome back to my channel. Today I have a beautiful color palette before me. If you love pink, this is definitely the video for you. So I have an arrangement of different pink beads that I found from my beading stash. And what's great about bead embroidery is you can use any type of bead pretty much that you have. Just find your colors that you like and think go together really well, and you can make it. You don't need to have a cabochon necessarily to do this project, though I am going to be working with that today. You can use just a bigger bead and put that in the middle, stitch it down first. I have my previous cabochon video, bead embroidery video. I show how to do it like that without even having a cabochon. I can link that in the description box below for you. But basically, the possibilities are really endless with bead embroidery, and I love doing it. So I just got some different pink beads, so I hope that you like this color palette. I really do. So I'm sorry if you can hear the mowing of, my neighbor is mowing their lawn right now, so I'm sorry if you can hear that in the background. But I'm going to be using white beading thread. This is Nymo, Beadalon Nymo D beading thread. It's just white, and I think it works great for bead embroidery. You can use up all your little scraps from different projects because you can just keep on using different little pieces for bead embroidery. It's super easy. You just put a knot on the end of your thread and then just come up through the stabilizer, so that's really good. If you do have this see-through thread, I don't think I've used this yet for any of my bead embroidery projects yet, but you could if you had that around the house and you didn't want to see white thread through different beads that you're using. I would say that this is sewing thread that I did purchase from Joann's. It's very fine. If you tug on it too hard, it can break. So I'm using this more and more. I'm starting to realize that I don't like it as much. I know that I have mentioned this in a few of my previous videos, saying that if you wanted it for brick stitch cuties, anything like that, this would be a great option. And I still think you can do that. It's just kind of, I don't know, it's really thin, it snaps easily, you can't tug too hard, it knots up really easily. So I might start looking at Fireline in the see-through version if that's, if you want to go with the see-through route, because it's a little bit thicker and it's easier to use. So it doesn't tangle up as much. So I'm going to be using bead embroidery needles today. I'm sure you could use a beading needle. You can probably do that. I don't think I've ever done that before. The difference with bead embroidery needles is they're quite short. You can see they're quite short, and that's what I'm going to be using. So this is the brand I'm using today. This is the Beadalon, and it's number 13 up there. You get 10 pieces. I bought this from Hobby Lobby, and it was only $2.99, and you can get a 40% off coupon on top of that, so that was really great. Then if you're working with beading thread and you seem to really be having it tangle up a lot on you, or if you're working with sewing thread, which I've never tried before, but I think you could probably do if you don't have beading thread on hand, you may want to have some beading wax on hand. This is Thread Heaven brand, but I'm sure that you could use other brands also. This is just the only kind I've gotten or used in the past, and it has a little bit of tack to it, but it's not ridiculously sticky. And what you do is just run your thread through that and make a few passes, and then hopefully it wouldn't tangle up as much for you. So the beads that I'm using today are from Joann's and Hobby Lobby. So this first one that I have right here, this is the 10-0 check glass seed beads, and this is the rose silver lined, and there's 24 grams in here, and I think that these tubes cost around, I think they might be anywhere between $3.99 or $4.49. I'm not sure. I think they bumped up the price to $4.49 recently, but I'm not quite sure about that. And then I also am going to be using the 6.0 check glass beads Beyond Pink, 24 grams. And what's funny is I think these are also called Beyond Pink and 6.0s. It's just two different years, or maybe not years, I'm sorry, it could just be die lots, but you can see how different those are, and I'm going to be using both of those in the project today. And then I also have these, and this is the 6.0 check glass rose silver line 24 grams, but this is the 6.0. So I have 6.0 and 10.0 in the silver line rose, and then I have these two, which are both the Beyond Pink. And then I have these are from, so these are all from Joann's. Now this is from Hobby Lobby. This is the check glass beads. These are the Rakai beads. You can see that on the side right there. And this is the 11.0 seed beads. They're pink Ceylon, and you get 18 grams, and they're regularly $2.99, and they're packaged tubed beads. Go 50% off quite frequently, pretty much every other week-ish, something like that. So $2.99, and you would get that for $1.50. So that's a pretty good value for 18 grams. Then at this point, I already have my cabochon glued on to my Pellon interfacing. I like to use Pellon interfacing. If you'd like to know the kind I use, I'll be having that written in the description box below. But you can also use Bead Embroidery stabilizer that's meant for it. I just find this in the sewing department though, the Pellon interfacing that I'm using, and I like to use that. I think it's a little bit more cost effective if you can get it on a sale. So also what's interesting about this video is I'm using see-through cabochons. These are great. You can use scrapbook paper then and put it behind your cabochons, and you can customize your cabochons to whatever you want. So I'll bring over the bag showing you what those cabochons look like. Okay, so I brought them over. This is the bag that I have. It's kind of a generic bag because I got mine through Amazon. So if you don't want to buy them through Amazon, you don't have to. They also sell this kind of thing at Hobby Lobby, but I did want to mention that you can get them through Amazon. They're pretty cost effective in the way that you can get quite a few. I guess it's a bulk buy, you might say then, but you can get quite a few and choose the size you want. But if you don't want to get all of one size and just a ton of that one, what I would recommend to you is going to Hobby Lobby. So Hobby Lobby in the Jewelry Shop Findings brand, it's $5.99, and these are glass cabochon variety packs. So this is really exciting. And let me see, I think it says there's 24 pieces in there. And this Jewelry Shop brand also goes 50% off, so you only have to spend about $3. So that's really great. And now I'll bring those over. You can see a variety of really interesting fun shapes, from really small to really big, squares, circles. Yep, there's an oval, there's some ovals in there also, just lots of fun. This is really a fun option to get if you wanted a fun variety instead of getting all of one type. Now let's talk glue. So when you're gluing, how these work is you take your silver glass dome, which let me get one out for you quick. You take your silver glass dome, and this is what it looks like. As you can see right through it, which is what's really fun. So you take this, and you would get a piece of paper, scrapbooking paper that you really think is pretty, and what you can do is I'll bring over the glue. You want to have Judekins Diamond Glaze. So basically you just take this, it has a nice pointy tip, which is great, and you just put a little dot in the center of your cabochon. Then at this point you would take it and you would put that down onto your scrapbooking page. Let me pretend with me that this is the scrapbooking page that I want it on. I would place it on and give it a little bit of a squeeze so that you can see that all the glue gets to the very edges. If some gets around the outside, I would kind of wipe that off to make sure that it doesn't get all over the place. But it's not the worst thing if it does. You can cut through it if it's a thin amount. At this point, you're going to want to let that dry. Follow the package instructions to tell you how long you want this to dry. I'm not sure if they tell you. I would say, I think you only need to wait for about 30 minutes, 15 to 30 minutes. Basically, if you have a whole array of ones that you want to glue, start at the beginning and start gluing, and then come back to that first one, and you should be able to start trimming it out. Now, when you trim out, you just want to trim out around it. You don't need to leave excess or go at an indent. No, just go perfectly upright and just trim out around that. Once you've trimmed out around that, this is where you're just going to use your regular E6000, which is what I glue my cabochons down with. Just what you use to glue down your cabochons, and you just would take that and would just press that down onto your beading stabilizer. So let me see if I kind of bend this. You can kind of see that there's, maybe you can't see it, but basically you're just going to have your cabochon, that thin layer of paper, and the paper is actually what's glued down to the stabilizer. So you're going to want to get yourself some diamond glaze. This is the Judikins brand again, and I also was able to find this at Hobby Lobby in the paper crafts section for $6.99. Again, you can use a 40% off coupon. Hobby Lobby always gives you a 40% off coupon through online, and you can get it for about $4.45. So you're going to want to have this also. So now at this point I will mention that I did mention scrapbook paper for a reason. We have tried doing images off of online and printing them off, and we didn't have great luck with the paper that we printed it onto. I'm sure that you can probably print off images onto maybe a thicker paper. I'm not sure, because we tried off of just photocopy paper and it started to warp the page and it wasn't too great. But you could probably find a way to make that work for you also. So now at this point, let's get started. So I have my cabochon, as I've mentioned, already glued on. Okay, so let's get beading. So I've threaded it on now, and now I'm just going to tie some knots at the very end. You could do one large knot, or I've previously mentioned in my other bead embroidery video that I like to do several small knots on top of one another. So I'm going to tie about 4 onto this end. That gives you a nice size knot that can just go on the end and make sure that it doesn't pop through the back of your stabilizer. So at this point I have a small knot, or a medium-sized knot. So at this point I would take my needle that's been threaded and I would come up beside this cabochon, just like that, and just exit it. With your knot there, it's going to make it so you can tug on that thread and it's not going to come out, which is great. So now at this point, I'll pause the camera and pour out my beads. And I did want to just quickly mention that if you often pour out too many beads, or you just have a hard time getting them off your mat, this is such a great tool to get. I really love this tool. It makes picking up these beads so fast and easy, and I'll be linking the video in the description box below where I show where you can get this awesome tool, and where I show the kit that I got this tool in. It's really great. It makes picking up beads a breeze if you pour out too many, so this is definitely a fun tool to have in your beading collection. Start by just doing a base row of, I'm thinking these beads, let's see. Yeah, I like that. So I'm going to start by picking up 2 beads onto my needle, and then I'm going to bring those down. When I see those come down, I'm going to hold the thread and taut with my thumb and take my needle and push those beads back snug. At this point I've pushed them back, so now I'm going to put my needle down right in front of those 2 beads that I've just added. Now I'm going to bring that down. Now something you can do is you can do a couch stitch, which also works, where you put on all of your beads and then you secure each one down individually. But I really just like doing this, add the 2 beads and keep on doing that all the way around. It works and looks the neatest for me. But you can definitely do whatever type of stitch you like to do. I mean, bead embroidery is really all up to you. So what I just did was I came back up. Sorry, I didn't really say what I was doing there, did I? So I put 2 beads on. Now I'm going to come up behind those 2 beads that I just added, with my needle coming up behind those 2 beads I just added. I'm going to come up through the stabilizer, and now I'm going to go through those 2 beads that I previously just added. And just do that and pull it tight so it doesn't loosen up on you, and then just add 2 beads to your needle, bring those down, stick down your needle right in front of those 2 beads that you just added. And then you're going to just come up right behind those 2 beads that you just added and go through those 2 beads. And you're going to want to do this all the way around. Now if you're doing a peyote encasement, you're going to want to make sure that you have an even number of beads. But if you aren't doing a peyote encasement, it really doesn't matter if you don't have an even amount of beads all the way around. You're just going to want to fit it to just put however many beads around it as it takes to make it a complete ring. So at this point, I'm going to pick up 2 beads, pick up your 2 beads, bring them down, hold it taut with your thumb, keeping the string taut, push those beads back with your needle, stick your needle down right in front of those 2 beads you just added, come up 2 beads back, right behind those 2 beads you just added, and go through those 2 beads you just added, and then just pull that tight. And at this point you can just continue doing this all the way around. All the way around, I just have to add my one last bead, and because this cabochon goes, it has a dome but then it goes so thin towards the edges, I am not going to build up around it, so I don't need an even number of beads. So I'm just going to use my one last bead, put that in the small gap that I had, and just let it pop in, and then come back up and go through that bead. Now at this point though, I'm going to go all the way around through all those beads just to reinforce them. So I'm bringing my needle through all those beads. You can go through one at a time if you want to, but I find that you can probably get through about 4 at a time, and it makes it a little bit faster to get it around the whole cabochon, all those beads around it. And I just do this just to tighten it all up, make that ring around it look more consistent and look really nice. So that's what I'm going to be doing here. It's just quickly going all the way around, tightening it up. And if you have a bead embroidery project that you've completed, or you do after seeing this video, I would love to see it. You can definitely leave a photo of that in the comment section below. I would absolutely love to see that. So at this point, we've worked our way all the way around. So now I'm going to, coming out of any bead, it doesn't matter whatsoever, I'm just going to go down next to the cabochon, just stick down into the stabilizer and pull through. So basically just making it so that my thread's exiting from the back. And if you have a thread there, you can just trim that off. You don't need a long thread to tuck in. I'm going to be coming up beside this row. Let's find out where my thread's going. Okay, so just come up beside this row of beads that you've already created. Just come up beside it. And at this point, I have to kind of determine what I want to do. I think I'm gonna do, oops, I think I'm gonna just go every other. Let's see what that looks like. And you can definitely plan yours out like me, and is in the ways you can try it out first by just stringing it on and laying it around. That's a great way to determine what you like. Let's see. Does that look good? You know, it kind of has a whimsical, fun, bubble gum Candyland sort of look, but I also kind of don't think that this color actually goes with my center cabochon. So I think I will try doing the every other with this and the light color. Maybe getting rid of that color, even though I really think that's a pretty color, but maybe we'll have to get rid of that. So now I'm going every other with this light color and with the silver line that matches the original ring of beads that we went around the cabochon with. So let's see how this looks. That looks much better. So I think I'll do that. So if you wanted to do the couch stitch, what you do is something like this. String all your beads on, stick down through your stabilizer, and then come up and go between each bead, securing it down. but as I've mentioned before, I don't love doing that type. I just can't get it as consistent that way. If you are great at that, that is great, you go for it. So this time, just to do it a little bit different, I'm gonna pick up 3 beads at a time, because it really, there's no rules like I've said before. So I'm just gonna pick up 3 beads, stick my needle down through the stabilizer right in front of those 3 beads. Then I'm gonna come up behind those 3 beads that I just added. And then I'm going to go through those 3 beads that I just added. And then I'm going to pull it tight. And at this point we're starting our second row of beads. So I'm going to pick up 3 beads, and I'm doing altering between the silver lined and that light pink. And I'm going down, and then I'm going to come up 3 beads, back, and go through all 3 of those beads. 2 beads could be a little bit more secure than going every 3 beads, but I am going to reinforce this loop of beads just like I did on that first round, or row, whatever you want to call it. So we will be reinforcing this. So I put on my 3 beads, went through the stabilizer. Now I'm going to come up behind those 3 beads and go through those 3 beads that we just added and pull it tight. Pick up 3 beads, go down through the stabilizer, and come up behind those 3 beads we just added and go through all 3 of those beads again. Almost towards the end of the row. So let me just quick complete this row. And this is getting tight because my thread is getting quite short. I would like to use the same thread to complete the row though, so when I go through it to tighten everything up, when I reinforce, so that I would have the same piece of thread, but we'll see if that's possible. Okay, so it looks like 3 will fit perfect, so I'll snug it up right next to that first bead of our row. That's where I'll put my needle. Bring my needle down, come up the 3 beads back, and go through those 3 beads. And now at this point we can just go through all the beads around this row, but it doesn't look like my thread will be long enough, so I'm actually gonna exit through the back of the stabilizer, so that I exit through the back, and then I would just tie a knot by weaving under some thread and go back through that loop that it creates, and then pull that, and then you can kind of weave under some of your threads that you have on the back of your work and pull that through, and then you can just trim that thread off. And now at this point, just put some more thread on your needle with the knot on the end of that thread, and you can just start up all over again. Okay, so I threaded my needle with the knot on the end, and I brought it so that I'm coming right back up through the stabilizer again. And at this point, I'm going to complete going all the way around this loop of beads by just going through about 4 beads at a time. You know, take as many as you feel comfortable with to go through at a time, and then just go through this whole thing just by going through. And I have a little knot in my thread, so that is why I'm having a little bit of trouble getting through. But this should be very simple, especially if you're using 6/0 beads, because they will have such large holes that you'll be able to get through them quite easily. So I'm just gonna go all the way around, tighten this up, especially if you have 6/0 beads. You could even go around a few times if you wanted to really fill in that gap in the center of each hole, to just make it a little bit tighter, more secure, and a very tight, neat looking loop of beads around your cabochon. So at this point, this is what mine looks like. I actually think it looks really cute. So what I'm picturing is at this point, let me quick see, do I want to work in some of these pearly beads? I'm almost thinking I don't. So let's see. I'm thinking I want to exit a silver bead. Yeah, exit a silver bead, pick up a pearly, that pink Ceylon, then pick up a silver lined, pink Ceylon, silver lined pink Ceylon. So that you're ending and beginning with the pink Ceylon, or whichever bead you choose. And then at that point, I'm coming out of a silver lined big 6-0, and I was coming out of this one, and I'm gonna go through the next one. I'm gonna see what that looks like, if I like what that's doing. I think it's kind of interesting and fun, so I'll continue that all around. So I'll pick up a pink, then a silver lined, the pearl, silver lined, pearl, and then go through the next silver lined bead. So if you do the same every other pattern, basically whatever bead type you're coming out of, you're gonna go through that. Gonna go through that one and skip the other type. I'm just gonna make sure that this lays the way I want it to. Like so. That's really fun. And then, so pearl, silver lined, pearl, silver lined, pearl. And I'm gonna go through the next big silver lined 6-0. Like so. And I'm gonna go all the way around. And then at that point, I can always determine if I like that look or not. Which I really, really liked the plain circle, so I'm not sure if I'm gonna like this or if I'll end up taking it out, but you know what? It all works. Silver lined pearl, and then going up through the next silver lined bead in the row. Pearl, silver lined, pearl, silver lined, pearl, going through the next 6-0. Silver lined bead. I'm gonna pull that tight. I kind of like it because if you've ever seen a Picot Edge, this kind of looks like that Picot Edge but on your beads. So I've come all the way around, and at this point I'm exiting this silver lined bead, and this silver lined bead is the bead that I was exiting to start my first one, and I'm gonna go through that same bead that I originally started by going through it. And I'm gonna pull it, get my beads to position the way I like them. And at this point, I'm gonna just look at this and see if I like it. And I think that that's kind of fun. I like that. So at this point, I'm gonna go through the base row once more of the big 6-0 beads, just to get my thread to kind of tighten up through all those beads. So I'm just going to continue around and reinforce all of those beads. And what's great if you do the Picot sort of edge, what I just did with those points coming off the 6-0 beads, is it will kind of hide your edging of stabilizer when you trim your piece out, and that will kind of make it a little bit easier to have a neat finished looking edge, because you won't be able to see if your edge doesn't look absolutely perfect. It will be okay still. So I'm gonna go through a few more beads in this 6-0 loop. Okay, so at this point, this is what it looks like. I think it looks really fun at this point. I could also see this turning into a pretty flower by adding a little green stem. You know, the options for bead embroidery are really just endless. So at this point, I think I'm going to take my needle. It's exiting out of one of these big 6-0 silver line beads, and I'm just going to stick it down into the stabilizer so that it's exiting through the back. At this point, so I'm just going to flip this over so you can see the back, and I'm going to create a knot on the back of this by going through that loop I created, weave under some stitches, weave through some, and you know, you're going to be putting backing on this probably, and you're going to be putting glue on the back of this when you put on your backing, so you don't have to really worry about your stitching looking really bad or your stitches looking really bad, because it will all get covered up and it will be okay. And that's what I would use the 6000 for, is to glue on the backing. So for backing you have several options. So right now what I'm going to do is just get my scissors and snip that thread off. That's all you need to do. Then you flip it and you see your pretty piece. So for backing you have several options. You can glue it onto some more of this interfacing. That's great too. You can use that same stabilizer that you worked your beading work off of. I personally like that option because I like the build of this stabilizer. I think it doesn't, you know, it doesn't like let off a ton of fuzz or anything. I really like this stuff. You can also use felt. I think that that's a common thing to go on the back. You can also use faux suede, you know, things like that on the back. You know, it's all up to you. You could have, I'm sure, used some fabric on the back. What you have in your stash already you could use, things like that. But I will be gluing mine onto another piece of this stabilizer stuff. Now, what you're going to want to do to start with is, for us, if you did this kind of edging, kind of pull that edging upwards so you can see it. What you're going to do is you're going to trim it out at this point. So what you're going to do is take your scissors, being careful not to trim any of those stitches that you love so much and you took so much time. You're going to trim your stabilizer. I'm going to roughly trim around this first. So it's just kind of like that. Now at this point, and you know, I made this harder for a demonstration because I did these little things, because it will be harder to see, but you're going to go around it, closely cutting it near the edge of your beads. I constantly flip mine back and forth to make sure that I don't cut through any of those stitches, and then I'll flip it again, cut a little bit more, flip it again, make sure constantly that I'm not trimming through any of those stitches. And then we also want to be careful we don't cut any of those beads off. So you have to be careful of two things with this project. But just keep on taking your time, trimming around. Just be careful not to cut through those stitches basically. And I'm going to keep on trimming around. Now if you did trim through some of those stitches, we are going to be gluing this down to a background fabric or stabilizer or backing basically. So it's not the worst thing if you trim through some of your stitches. We are going to be using glue, so that can kind of help you a little bit there. But try not to, but we can use some glue. And if you do snip through a thread, I would reinforce using my needle with some beading thread on it again, and reinforce whatever you think what you trimmed would make just come off your stabilizer. I'd reinforce through that. So at this point it kind of looks like this. I'll take a little bit more time, try getting a little bit more of an even cut around this. I would take it and I'd put some E6000 on the back of this, that's what I use, and I would take this and I would put it down onto my stabilizer, your background fabric, and I would hold and press this, squeeze it, follow your package instructions for your glue and determine how long it should set before you go on to your next step of finishing the edge. So it's a different day and my cabochon is glued down to the backing fabric of my choice and it's completely dry now. So at this point you're going to take your scissors and you're kind of going to repeat the step that you did previously. You're going to take and carefully trim out around this, And what's nice about this one is you can kind of just get even with your previous layer of stabilizer that you stitched on. So wherever you trimmed that to, you can kind of just trim this one too. And you're just going to want to carefully do this. You're going to want to keep your scissors quite up and down, not at funny angles, because that could cause the bottom stabilizer to be at a different angle than the top stabilizer or whatever background fabric you're using. So just try to keep it quite upright and carefully trim around this. And that's what I'm going to do here. And you can take all the time you want to with this process and just carefully trim around this. I think that this is a little bit easier than with the stitches, so before when you had to trim out, because this way you can kind of just snug your scissors up against your first layer of stabilizer and just kind of trim around. You don't have to worry so much about snipping through your stitches. So at this point I've trimmed off a majority of it, so now you can kind of see the two layers, and you can kind of see that I'm going off that top layer to trim this one. So at this point I'm just kind of trimming, and I went around the entire thing, so now I'm just kind of trying to go around and just kind of fix up little areas and make sure that it all looks really nice. And I think that that looks good. Basically you want it to be even on top and bottom so that they both are coming out at the same area and one doesn't go out farther than the other layer. So at this point I have my embroidery needle again threaded onto some beading thread, and I also waxed it for this step so that it doesn't get all tangled up. And then I have a nice size knot at the end, so that's like 4 knots stacked on top of each other. So at this point you can see kind of the two layers of stabilizer. There's kind of a gap between them. Not much of a gap, but you can kind of see the difference. So at this point what I would do is I would come so that my needle is only coming through that first piece of stabilizer that we originally did our bead work off of. Don't go through that back clean piece of stabilizer that you just put on, or your background fabric. Don't go through that. This way when you bring your needle through, that knot will be snugged inside of the layers of stabilizers, 2 of those silver lined rose beads. That's what I'm doing, and that's the 10-0 size. Picking up 2 of those, and let's see if I can get this in focus closer up. You can see my thread is coming out of the first front stabilizer from right here. So I'm going to go quite close to that and go through both the front and the back stabilizer and come out like this, so that you can see that it's going through the back and the front stabilizer with those 2 beads on my needle. At this point I'll pull that, and now I'm going to go up through that second bead with my needle, and when you pull on that, you can kind of straighten it up a little bit, but when you pull on that, you now have 2 beads laying down. And it looks a little wonky and crooked at this point, but as you continue going along, it will start straightening up. But at this point, that's their 2 beads. So now at this point, I'm going to pick up 1 bead only at this point and go from the back of my stabilizer to the front of my work with my needle and pull my needle through. And now I'm going to go up through that 1 bead that we just added. And make sure it doesn't tangle up your thread on any of those little spiky edges that we created before. And at this point you have 3 beads on there. Now it looks a little wonky at this point, but it will start looking neater. So I'm picking up 1 bead again, going through from the back to the front. I'm going through both layers of my stabilizer. And you don't want to come from too far down. You want to be quite close to the edge on the stabilizer so that your thread doesn't stretch from really far down on your back stabilizer. So go quite near the edge. Stick your needle from the back through to the front with your 1 bead on it, And now at this point, pull it up, and at this point you want to go up through that bead you just added. And pull on that. And at this point you're going to repeat that same thing all the way around. So at this point I'm just going to pick up one bead, go from the back to the front, relatively close to where I previously was coming out. At this point, I'm going to go up through that bead I just added. And when you pull on that, it should snug up. What you want to see is that you have the thread bridges between each one of your beads, which makes it so that you see the whole of your bead facing up. And that's what you'll work off of if you decide to do a picot edge. If you were going to do a picot edge, which is kind of like what we did on our actual bead embroidery project where they stick out like that, you're going to want to have an even number of beads going around the outer edge of your cabochon. Okay, at this point I added my last bead, so I just put it on just like all the other ones. So at this point I'm coming up out of that last bead, and I'm going to go down through our original bead that started out the row. So there's a small gap you can kind of see between the two, but maybe if I show you this from the back you'll be able to see it better. I'm not sure. So I'm coming up out of the last bead that I just added, and now I'm going to go down through that first bead that started out the row. So at this point, this is kind of what it looks like. Coming up out of that last bead I was just coming out of, and then going down through the bead that started out the row. And then when you kind of tug on this, it will just tighten up really nice. So at this point though, I'm going to come up through that bead that was ending our row once more, just kind of doing a circle motion. I was coming up, going down, and now I'm going to come back up and down through that bead one more time. That will really just tighten it up and make it look really nice. So I am tugging as I do this last bit just to make it look neat. And I'm going down through that and tugging it, and now it's just completely popped together and there's no gap. So now at this point I'll just come up through the next bead in the row, and this is where you can either finish off your piece or you can decide to do the picot edge, which because I have an even number of beads I am going to do the picot edge. So to start with, it looks like it'll be easier for me to show you from the back. It really doesn't matter which direction you're looking at your piece from, this will work. So I'm going to pick up a pearl bead, a silver lined bead, and a pearl bead. This would make a regular picot edge. You only need 3 beads to create a picot edge, but I want to do the same thing that I did on the front of the piece with that edging, because I thought that could be fun to have the 2 dimensions of that. So at this point I'm going to pick up another silver lined and another pearl, so that I have 3 pearls and 2 silver lines. So now at this point I'm coming up out of this silver lined bead right here. This is where it's coming up out of. So I'm going to go down through this bead right next to it. So let me do that quick. So I was coming up out of this silver lined bead. So now I'm going down through the silver lined bead right next to it. And when we pull this, basically odd numbers work for your picot edge. At this point, we've created that little bead right there, that little picot edge. So at this point we're going to reposition so that we can come up through, we're coming down through this bead right here, this silver bead, and we're going to go up through the silver bead right beside it. Let's see if I can get my camera to focus. So we're coming out of, up through that silver lined bead right beside it. So at this point I'm going to pick up a pearl bead, a silver lined, a pearl bead, a silver lined, and a pearl bead. And I'm going to go back down through the next silver lined bead in the row. So that's what's cool about Picot Edge when you're doing it around your bead embroidery project. It's so cool because it's kind of built in even, because you're gonna be building off of 2 beads. So I'm coming out of this silver lined bead right here, and now I'm going down through the silver lined bead right beside it. At this point, I'm going to go up through the silver lined bead right beside that bead that we were just coming down through. And at this point, I'm going to do this all the way around. Okay, so I have made it all the way around. I started here with that edge and came all the way around. I know that this can be a little confusing looking because we already kind of did a Picot Edge on our top of our project. But at this point, I'm coming out of this silver lined bead, so I'm going to come up through the silver lined bead right beside it. Once you get the hang of this, it's really easy to do. So you're going to pick up a pearl, silver lined pearl, silver lined pearl, the same way you've been doing, and then go down through that last silver lined bead option. There will only be one more bead in the row. I was coming out of this one, I'm going down through that one right beside it, and now there's no other beads to go through, and that means that we've completed our Picot Edge. And what's great is I did have an even number, so I counted right, so it worked. So at this point, I probably would just go up through the next silver lined bead in the row, just the silver lined bead, and then flip my piece to the front. And you can see it does give it a fuller look if you decide to do that Picot Edge on the back also. Now I have kind of 2 Picot edges. It's kind of cute. So at this point, coming out of that bead, you know, you kind of have to decide how to weave off at this point. I think I'm going to go down through a silver lined bead again. And now at this point, we'll probably out of the bottom of a silver lined bead. So I would just stick my needle through the stabilizer very close to the bottom of that bead so that you won't see much of a thread path through your stabilizer. I'd just stick it through that stabilizer, and I would push that through to the front of the stabilizer. And as you can see, you can't really see it. The stitching, that little stitch, you don't see much. So at this point, when I'm on the inside, I would probably work up through a 6/0 that I have in the front because I brought it to the front of my work, and now I would just quickly weave through a few 6/0s. Make sure not to get caught on any of your beads that are standing up. And now at this point, what you would want to do is I would go under the thread path that was separating these 6/0s. So I went through a few 6/0s. Now I'm coming from the side, going under the thread path of some of these 6/0s that I previously had on. And at this point, it will kind of create a loop, and I would stick my needle through that, basically tying a knot around, and I'll do that again, going under the thread that's in between the 6/0s, and then that loop that's created going through, basically tying a few knots around the thread that's inside the 6/0s. And then I would weave my needle through some more 6/0s. That way that knot will just kind of get pulled on the inside, but yet you also secured and knotted your thread. You could do that in several areas all the way around, or just exit a 6/0 and then trim off your thread. What I would probably do though is I would probably go through my 6/0s, and then how I would end is just with my thread exiting a 6/0. It's exiting this one right here. I would just go like this and stick my needle down right beside that 6/0 so that it's exiting through the back, and you can't see any thread paths on the front whatsoever, and so that it's exiting from the back. And where it's exiting from the back, I would at this point just take my scissors and trim that really close to the back. And at this point, you have your finished capuchon. I think that this is so pretty and really easy. Basically, for finishing, what I would say is use your own judgment and weave through a few different beads, and then I also usually try to do a knot that's kind of hidden behind some sort of beadwork or through some beadwork or something like that, and then just bring your needle out of the backing and then just trim off that thread, and then you have a really nice finished back and then a really pretty finished side of your beadwork also. I think that this one turned out really cute. I love the pink. The really whimsical, fun look to this is really fun. I would love to know what color palette you often go to. I do like pink. I like coral colors also, but recently, if you've watched my previous Bead Embroidery Project, you'll see that I'm attracted to a lot of the fun yellow, tangerine, greenish lime color with turquoise. I really like all those bright summery colors. I will be linking that video in the description box below also if you'd like to see that bead embroidery project that I did. So I hope that you enjoyed this video. Thank you so much for watching. Bye.